conference has been amazing so far, exceeded all of our expectations. So hopefully everyone has enjoyed the conversation. Hope you enjoyed lunch, had a chance to connect with people. We have a great afternoon ahead. We're going to change things up a bit with our next session. Instead of a panel, we're going to have a fireside conversation. And I'm very pleased to welcome Tammy Brandt. Tammy is Deputy General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Creative Artists Agency, where she oversees corporate legal matters, including mergers and acquisitions, compliance, intellectual property, government relations, and governance. CAA sits at the center of the entertainment industry, representing many of the world's leading actors, writers, directors, athletes, and creators across film, television, sports, and digital media. Please give Tammy Brandt a warm welcome. So we're going to be talking primarily about AI. Tammy, thank you so much for doing this. We've heard a lot already about, sort of taking a potentially antagonistic approach towards AI, and we'll get to that potentially in a second. But, how can Hollywood effectively, when appropriate, collaborate with AI technology to drive innovation in a way that doesn't really cannibalize the actor and the creative market?
Yeah, so I thought the AI panel was great that we had before lunch. I think everything that was said earlier is we believe as well at CA, which is AI is here, it's here to stay. It's amazing technology. We've developed relationships with all the large AI companies. Last Monday and Tuesday, I was with a group of folks from CA, and we went to Anthropic, and we were at OpenAI, and we were at YouTube. So we're in constant conversations with them about what they're doing and how they work with Hollywood and with this ecosystem. And I think the most important thing is, it's what has been discussed a lot, but it's the consent and it's the control and the compensation. So doing it together, not just taking the IP and doing what they want with it, and then everyone, on the defensive trying to deal with it. Let's be collaborative. Let's, work on it together. And, that is evolving. But I think what you've seen even in the last year, everyone has been talking even at this conference, obviously, about the OpenAI and Disney deal. But I think that at its core, and again, we don't all know exactly what it is. We know it's $1 billion. We know it's 200 characters. We don't obviously, unless people worked on it, know the details of it. But it's an example of doing, licensing the IP. And, two sophisticated parties agreed on a construct, and they licensed the IP. And that's what we want to see more of, which is whatever it looks like, but a meeting of the minds, and then a deal is struck, which is what people in Hollywood do every day and have been doing for hundreds of years.
And you mentioned the licensing market. That obviously has been a big factor in a lot of this litigation, where there's a functioning licensing market, and then the copyright issue is actually, well, why should you get a free lunch here when other people are paying for a license? Obviously, you're just skirting the law to not have to pay a license. What is if you could tell us a little bit about that licensing market and how that's evolving? For people in the audience, we're not in that day to day. It'd be nice to get a sense of how that market is coming together.
Yeah, I think when it has to do with AI, it's very nascent, right? Because obviously the initial, AI was, people weren't even talking about licensing. They were like, well, we're training these models and it's necessary, you name it, public policy, to cure cancer, everything else. I've spent a fair amount of time on the Hill as well, where you live, and, it's interesting talking to different people in this area, which is, I think you've seen the shift, and the Disney OpenAI is an example of licensing, but now people are talking about the licensing, right? Especially on the outputs. The training, as the other panel addressed, is still a little bit, the AI companies don't really want to talk about licenses around training yet, but they're definitely talking about it on the outputs, which we view as a good thing. And CAA, and it's been in the press for the last couple of years, we were kind of on the cutting edge where we worked with one of the vendors that does the digital scans for Marvel movies, and we have several of our clients that have gotten scanned and their voice, and they have a digital double in what we call the CAA vault, which is, and the reason that we established that and we thought that was so important, a year and a half ago, before digital doubles got as much press as they get now, was it stabilizes and it reinforces exactly what we've been doing with intellectual property for hundreds of years. You have an asset, you have an intellectual property asset, and there's a marketplace for it, right? So if you want to, George Clooney's digital double, and he's a CA client, you can call CA, and if he has been scanned into the vault, which he has, then you can talk to us about how would we possibly use that asset and what are the terms, right? And then again, like anything else, we're not here to say the terms have to be, it's like anything else. It's a negotiation, and then you figure out what makes sense. But it's a marketplace, and it's a legitimate way to do it, and it, most importantly, involves the consent of the person that you're licensing their likeness, which is what we feel is just so critical as AI evolves and impacting Hollywood, is having that consent, from whoever owns the intellectual property we're talking about.
And maybe we can get this in a second, but when it comes to the training, Hollywood actually has been pretty aggressive in policing pirating over the years. There have been lawsuits against AI companies for training, using pirated content for training their LLMs. How do you see that playing? I mean, they're not willing to come to the table yet. I mean, obviously, at some point, these copyright...
It's the cases, right? Yeah. I think everyone's kind of waiting to see. I thought the other panel, and they're more experts on it than I am. I mean, I obviously track the cases, but I think that'll be the question. What is fair use? And there will be fair use, around. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that, but in what situations? And then they're going to have to, come talk about the licensing there. But I think the thing that has shifted in the last year, which I think is, just as somebody that lives this policy every day, talking to people that impacts, now there's the focus on the licensing of the output, which is very different than initially, where they weren't even talking about that. So I think it's a step in the right direction.
And, maybe taking another step back, and then we can get into some more details in a minute, but what are some of the just high-level potential threats versus the opportunities that AI presents to the entertainment industry?
I mean, I think the threats are, they've been touched on. It was touched on in the last panel. I mean, obviously, job displacement. I mean, as it's in the history of time, as you have technology revolutions, it results in job displacement. It does. And in most cases, then I think you can look back and then you can say, oh, there's just different jobs now, but, generally, the unemployment rate has stayed about the same. It'll be interesting if AI is different, and it could be, right? AI is a very different technology, and I can't see that far into the future. So certainly job displacement, I mean, intellectual property theft, which we've been talking about, that is, and creative devaluation. I mean, that's really, we talk about it all the time, and it's not just the CA clients, we worry about the content creator economy, which is, it's my 8-year-old son who's dying to have a YouTube channel, right, and wants to create content. I don't know if anyone will watch it, but but again, you've seen all these. If you have kids, you do see, where they are able to make money, and it's a thing. So you don't want to stop those creative juices, right? You want to have an outlet for them, and we care about, as much as my 8-year-old son, but we care about stealing intellectual property across the board. It's not just CA clients, and I think that's just really important, and I do think Hollywood is aligned on that. And I think the more that we can continue to come together on that is important, because at times, there's arguments like, well, we have to beat China. Again, I'm all for beating China, in certain, defense and other, situations, but that doesn't mean it's at the cost of creators. And I think that's just a really important thing not to lose sight of.
Yeah. What do you think, and, I mentioned this book I read recently, The Score by Thi Nguyen, about algorithms and outsourcing your values to algorithms. You're already seeing that to some extent with Netflix and YouTube when it comes to the entertainment industry. AI has the prospect of taking that to another level where you're just asking the AI, what should I watch? And then they're just picking for you. I've had a couple of conversations. I've been out here a week about this, and it seems like a big debate. I mean, about the algorithm. Some people just see it as inevitable. Other people think of it as a fight to be had. How do you think about it? How do your clients think about, the control over, what content is put in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, AI has been around for a long time. I mean, Netflix has been telling us what shows it thinks we want to watch for a while, even before any of us even knew what AI, actually meant in a way. It's a good question. I mean, I think our clients would generally, again, we want the audience to decide what they want to see. I mean, that's what Hollywood's built on, right? You make movies, you make content, and then, some things hit and some things don't. And sometimes, you don't know. And then it's always fun when it's the thing out of left field, right? That all of a sudden that it is the new thing, right? So I think that would be the concern is, who's making those decisions, and is that independent creator or filmmaker, you name it, who might not be like on the radar as like, oh, this is a for sure hit, and it's lost, that no one ever sees it because of those algorithms. I think that's the concern. So I mean, and that is part of the problem. I mean, AI can create so much content so quickly, and it repurposes content, and we all know that, right? With the sports clips and everything else, there's so many different platforms and distribution channels, and there's so much content. It is really hard for the consumer, I think, at times. Not only do you have the AI slop that everyone talks about, so sometimes what we would argue is not great content, and again, it doesn't matter who it's made by, but it's just not all that compelling, but it's out there. So how does the consumer get to what they actually want to get to? So that's where algorithms might be necessary in a way, but the consumer should have some input into, what is being directed at them.
Do you think about transparency into the algorithm, either from a contract standpoint or from like a public policy standpoint, as like at some point necessary to just be able to peek under the hood, like make sure Stephen Miller is not picking out what you're watching, right? Like,
That's terrifying. Yeah. I think you'll have to, similar to what you see with some of the California laws around transparency around what goes into the training of the models, which again goes back to our copyright issues, but similar. I think that will have to happen.
We've already talked about this a little bit, but worth kind of bringing up again. You have high profile, not just entertainment, you also have sports clients. I'm curious, I've already asked you like a specific question about how they think, but taking a step back, what are some of the priorities that they have, and how is CAA supporting them when it comes to these, challenges?
I will say this, I've been at CAA just 3 years, so I'm not like a lifer, but I will say one of the best parts of my jobs is I get to talk to these high profile clients in some cases, or their counsel or their managers. I mean, sometimes it's people on their team. It's really interesting. It's all over the map what people think about AI. And I think the notion, I get it a lot, the notion that all of these, like this, A++ actor their lawyer knows these issues inside and out, I don't think is always fair, right? Because again, a lot of those lawyers might be in this room and we work with them all the time. These are not issues that they have traditionally had to deal with, right? So these are novel issues, they're intellectual property issues. Yes, they've of course been working on contracts for their clients and licensing in the scope, but some of these copyright and some of these technology questions are new, and that's okay. So one of the things we try to do as CA is stay on top of it and be a resource, right? We're not the legal counsel for our clients. But to answer your question directly, I would say there are some of our clients that don't want anything to do with AI. They don't want to hear about it. They don't even want to hear about, like, when it's being used inappropriately on the internet. They just don't want to be bothered with it. They're like, enough of my work is out there that people know, my body of work, and I can't control that, so I don't want to. Then you have the ones that are super hypersensitive to every little thing, and we've talked about it a little bit. It's whack-a-mole. It's really hard, and it has been the case even before AI, to control misuse and piracy and even satire, things that are even protected by the First Amendment in all cases. And in sports, it's really interesting. I personally am a big sports fan. What's interesting about AI in sports is, unlike, where you get a lot of the headlines in Hollywood, like AI is going to kill Hollywood, and again, I definitely don't think that, but in sports, it is complementary, right? So if you have we have two of the largest soccer agencies in the world. They're based in London. A lot of those players literally are contractually obligated to be playing like 10 and a half months out of the year. They look at AI and a digital double, again, done with their consent, right, as a way that they can do more commercials. They can do different things. They can be places that they otherwise cannot be. And they have been leaning into AI a little more than we've seen some of our Hollywood clients. But some of our Hollywood clients are leaning into it as well. Especially, it's what we've talked about in the Ben Affleck deal. I think is a good example of somebody that really knows Hollywood, has built this company, and it's a productivity tool. And again, I understand that will impact certain jobs. I'm not, we're not saying, but I think that's a way to use AI in a way that will help Hollywood. It'll help continue to make good content and make it, more efficient. And overall, I think our clients are okay with that.
I was talking to an agent a couple days ago about he had to stand up for his client in a bit of a legal dispute, and the lawyers were getting a little bit lost in the minutia, and he had to step in and just stand up for the client. Do you see that as something that's necessary on the AI front? There's just going to be so many of these little wrinkles. We've already, we've done some reporting on consolidation in the industry. It seems like the terms are getting worse or trickier or what have you, or less favorable to the worker. Do you see the agents as playing a role in doing, taking that type of representation for the client?
Absolutely. I think, the agent, our job is to be their advocate, right? To be their advocate, understand these issues, and help make sure, that yes, that the deal, or that they understand what they're agreeing to. And we get it. I can't even tell you how many calls I've been on with a client where, I've been scanned, 15 times for these big blockbuster movies. Why do I have to be scanned again? Well, the fact is that when you sign the deal to be in these blockbuster movies, they want you scanned. They want you scanned in character. They want you scanned then, right? Not your scan 5 years before. So even with the vault, we certainly see those scans being used, and we're absolutely doing commercial deals involving those assets. But the scanning technology has been out there for a while. It's only more advanced. Yes, now these scans can de-age you, or they can age you. They can do things that they, weren't able to do a few years ago. But to be quite candid, most of the time, the argument is not about whether you're going to be scanned on and I'm talking about big movies. I mean, and it depends on the ecosystem. But then it's just a question of, we have gotten for some of our clients where that client will own the scan, right? So otherwise, it's always about the license, how can you use that scan, and in what circumstances, after a certain period of time, and on what marketing initiatives, et cetera. So those issues are complex. They've existed for a while because scans are not new, but now what you can do with the scans has evolved so much that you have to really think about that. You have to think about it. The lawyers in town have to be educated on it and make sure, and our business affairs folks that work with the agents cutting those deals really are day-to-day deal with those issues with all the studios, and it's important. And then the SAG and the Writers Guild, I know it's been discussed, but obviously what's in those agreements is really important for the whole ecosystem, right? Because not all actors have the negotiating power that sometimes, CA clients have the privilege of having, to be quite candid. And not all our clients have it either, right? So it just, having those protections in the guild agreements is very important.
And, you mentioned you're following some of the cases. What are some of the big AI cases that you're looking at and looking to for guidance on how this is all going to play out?
Yeah, I agree with the previous panel on the copyright cases, which is hopefully end of 2026, 2027. I mean, this isn't going to be forever. We're going to get some conclusion here. But it appears like it's trending towards exactly, I agree with their conclusion, which is training, if you license the, IP, then it's probably fine. If you don't, it's a problem. And then the market substitution will be interesting how that case plays out as it gets into the higher courts and likely to the Supreme Court. I mean, it seems unlikely to me that this issue won't eventually make its way to the Supreme Court and get resolved. So we follow those cases. We think they're important. We obviously represent a lot of publishers. The Anthropic case was very important. Again, similar to the OpenAI Disney deal, it established, yes, you have to pay for the intellectual property. And then I think there's a lot of conversation, and I'm new enough to the industry, I'm not particularly an expert here. I think the reality is that compensation enough? I'm not going to opine on that, but at least there was a recognition of the IP rights and there was compensation to the victims. Again, whether that is enough or not, is a different question. So we follow that, and then I think on the policy front, they touched on it in the last one. We completely agree with copyright is very important. Trademarks, I didn't hear as much to that being discussed, but I know a lot of you are from LA. There's a lot of press in the last month or so around the Matthew McConaughey trademarks that were filed by Kevin Yorn and his firm. That's interesting. Trademarks are, normally you can't in the abstract, protect an image, a digital image, right? But you can if it's being used to promote goods and services. I've talked to Kevin, who's great and works with a lot of our clients, and they view the trademark filings that were issued there, and Matthew McConaughey is not a CA client, so it's not, this is not at all partisan, but it's just another tool. So it's a motion mark, it's around him, looking a certain way, sitting a certain way, saying, all right, all right, all right, promoting goods and services. They've acknowledged, even in the press, when those were issued and it got a lot of press, they're not sure how widely interpreted those filings will be, right? But again, I think it's a good example of using existing intellectual property laws to try to protect these things. But we completely agree with what the other panel said. We have long been a supporter and have been very involved with the No Fakes bill, which has been reintroduced in Congress. It's currently in committee. Big tech is behind it, CA is behind it, William Morris, a lot of the Recording Institute, SAG, you name it. And we think it's just really critical that we get a federal right of publicity because of that state patchwork of laws that they discussed before. But more importantly, if you just look at the AI landscape in Washington, you have the Take It Down Act, which was around explicit digital likenesses, basically. You can take them down. Well, people don't really, it's not a very controversial topic, right? I think everyone can get behind that makes sense, and it was, supported by the First Lady, and it went through. I think No Fakes has gotten a lot of attention from the industry. I would say in DC, not always as much. At the end of last year, there were several executive orders that were issued around AI, establishing different task forces, and then there's the one that kind of implied that if the states have laws that are conflicting with certain federal laws, that they'll withhold money to the states in other areas. Now, whether that's legal or not is a different issue, and it's all, those haven't really gotten a lot of, I think they're in the process of setting up the task forces, so they haven't gotten a lot of momentum. So we view it as really important that we get this federal right of publicity soon. And it doesn't matter, the copyright cases will work their way through and they're gonna resolve however they resolve, but we think that's a really key thing because it just gives everyone a level playing field that they can use. And I agree with the comment before, the DMCA, again, we don't want the same thing for AI images, the whack-a-mole, right? We want something that it can hopefully have statutory damages and influence platforms and distribution channels to keep it down, right? Because that's so important. Because otherwise, it's just a constant whack-a-mole. And with AI, literally being able to create so much so quickly, you'll just never be able to keep up with it.
And one thing I've actually been surprised by is I haven't seen as many actors and creatives coming out publicly talking about AI, talking about what they want to see. My Columbia University colleague, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he has set a a lot of class of '04. We've got a couple people in here. He's been very outspoken. There have been a bunch of, not a bunch. There haven't been as many as I would have thought. And these are legal issues that, judges are humans, members of Congress are people sometimes, and they can be educated, they can be convinced, right? Why do you see? Or am I wrong to think that we haven't had that many people come out and speak publicly about this? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think the gentleman on the previous panel who said that it was kind of like the authors and the Anthropic lawsuit, regarding the publishers was kind of first. Now I think with Sora 2, with C-Dance, with there's been several of these video, platform, releases, which very quickly there's been a trend. They release it, Hollywood freaks out. I mean, everyone, and they get all these cease and desist letters, again, which we think is good, and CA has been sending them as well. And then they back off. And then they're like, yes, we understand. We need to have more guardrails and policies. And we talk to all of those people. So we get on the phone, and we talk to the GCs at those companies. And, I mean, that's the good news. At least CA, we're able to get to them. And they're like, oh, we're sorry, we didn't. And it's like, come on, you knew, that you can't do some of these things. So I think you're starting to see now more of the Hollywood. It's truly impacting them, and you'll see more of that. I know we have clients that are absolutely, Scarlett Johansson has been very, very vocal in this area around certain things. I think, I suspect, I'm just projecting this, but I suspect as No Fakes hopefully, gets more traction and I think you'll see some heavyweights testifying at Congress. I think it's here. I think the community's interested. I know there are a lot of CA clients and other, clients that are very interested, and I think they see, the impact. And I think that, the Elvis Act in Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, we've met with her a couple times. She gets the issues. She influenced that. She's running for governor now of Tennessee, but, that was a really important piece of legislation for the music community, in Nashville. And we think, and they got a lot of really famous people behind that. I think you'll see that. I think it's just been a little premature.
Okay.
But I think they're here. I think people in this room, a lot of you work with, folks in Hollywood. I think they will come when they're needed. I do.
Well, I'm excited to see how this all plays out. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Tammy.